Welcome to Life Stories. Have you ever felt like the outsider in your own family? Constantly overlooked and unappreciated? Emma Carter knows that feeling all too well. Born into a family that favored her younger brothers, she spent years fighting for recognition, only to realize that some people will never see your worth, no matter how hard you try. But instead of letting their rejection define her, she built a life filled with love, success, and true belonging. Stay with us as we take you through Emma's powerful journey of resilience and self-discovery. Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's story. I have always been the odd one out, the black sheep, as they say. My name is Emma Carter, and I am 32 years old. But for as long as I can remember, I have never truly fit in. I was the firstborn daughter of two highly respected doctors, Elizabeth and Mark Carter, two people who commanded admiration in their fields but never seemed to have enough room in their hearts for me. My younger twin brothers, Jake and Ryan, were the center of their universe. From the moment those two were born, it was as if I had faded into the background, my existence dimming beside their brilliance. At first, it was little things, the kind that most people wouldn't notice. Jake and Ryan always got the bigger slice of cake, the newer toys, the extra hugs and kisses at bedtime. As a child, I convinced myself that maybe I just wasn't asking for those things loudly enough. Maybe if I tried harder, if I did better, they would see me too. But the older I got, the more obvious the difference became. It wasn't just about cake or toys anymore. I will never forget my 12th birthday. 4 months. I had been dropping hints about this art set I saw in the window of a small shop downtown. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a simple wooden case filled with watercolor paints, sketch pencils, and a few brushes. But to me, it was everything. I imagined myself sitting by the window in my room, painting for hours, lost in a world of color and imagination. When my birthday finally came, I sat at the kitchen table, my heart racing as my parents handed me my one present. I tore off the wrapping paper eagerly, only to find a math workbook. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a smile. "Thank you," I whispered. But something inside me cracked that day. As we grew older, the favoritism only became more blatant. Family trips were always centered around what Jake and Ryan wanted. If Jake wanted to go skiing, we would pack up and head to the slopes. If Ryan got into surfing, suddenly, we were flying to California. Any suggestion I made, museums, art exhibits, even a simple picnic in the park, was dismissed or ignored entirely. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need their approval or attention. But deep down, I did. Every child does. Then came the college applications. I still remember the way my mother's face twisted in disbelief when I told her I wanted to study art restoration. Art restoration, she laughed. "Emma, be serious. That's not a real career." Jake, always the golden boy, smirked. "Yeah, Emma, why don't you do something useful, like becoming a doctor?" That was the moment that broke me. Not because of their words, though they stung, but because of the way my parents looked at him. The pride in their eyes, the admiration in their smiles. I had never seen them look at me like that. Not once. Despite their disapproval, I pursued my passion. When my acceptance letters arrived, I was ecstatic to find out I had been awarded a scholarship to study art restoration at a respected university. I ran into the kitchen, the letter clutched in my hands, my voice trembling with excitement. "Mom, Dad, I got a scholarship." My mother barely glanced up from her medical journal. "That's nice. Honey," she said absently. "Did you hear? The boys got perfect scores on their SATs." My heart sank. The day I left for college was nothing like the day Jake and Ryan did. When they left, there was a big family dinner. Words of encouragement, and warm embraces. When I packed my bags, I had nothing but an old laptop and a suitcase filled with second-hand clothes. My parents were too busy with work to even drive me to the bus station. But there was one person who always saw me. Grandma Margaret. She showed up that morning, waiting for me outside my apartment with her warm, knowing smile. As I was about to board the bus, she pulled me aside, pressing a small envelope into my hand. "I'm so proud of you. My darling," she whispered. "Don't ever forget that." Inside the envelope was a check, not a fortune, but enough to ease my worries for a while. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that she had noticed me, that she believed in me when no one else did. As the bus pulled away, I looked out the window, watching my grandmother wave at me until she was just a blur in the distance. I told myself I wouldn't cry, that I was strong enough to handle this on my own. But I did cry. Because deep down, no matter how independent I wanted to be, I still wished my parents had been there. I still wished, after all these years, that they would turn to me and say, "We're proud of you, Emma." But I knew better. I was done waiting for them to see me. College was a strange kind of freedom. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living in the shadow of my brothers. No one knew Jake and Ryan here, and I didn't have to hear their names in every conversation with my parents. I could just be Emma. But that didn't mean things were easy. Money was tight, really tight. My scholarship covered tuition. But rent, food, and supplies were another story. I took on multiple part-time jobs, working as a barista in the mornings and cleaning at a local museum in the evenings. The exhaustion settled into my bones, but I was determined to make it work. Meanwhile, my parents were fully funding my brother's luxurious college experiences. Their tuition at Ivy League schools, paid in full. Their brand new cars, courtesy of Mom and Dad. Spring break trips to Miami, Cancun, and Europe, all on my parents' dime. During our occasional family calls, I'd hear about Jake's exclusive fraternity events or Ryan's research internship at a prestigious hospital. My mother's voice would light up with pride as she recounted their accomplishments. "And how are your classes, Emma?" she would ask as an afterthought, her voice already fading into disinterest. "They're good," I would say, forcing a smile even though she couldn't see it. "Actually, I just got an internship at the university's art conservation lab." "Oh, that's nice," she'd reply, before quickly shifting the conversation back to my brothers. It shouldn't have hurt, but it did. Still, I pushed forward, pouring myself into my studies. Art restoration wasn't just a career choice for me, it was my escape, my passion, my way of breathing life back into something others had discarded. There was something deeply satisfying about uncovering hidden beauty beneath layers of neglect. Maybe, in a way, I saw myself in the paintings I worked on, overlooked, faded, waiting for someone to see my worth. In my final year of college, I landed an internship at a small but respected museum in Chicago. It wasn't glamorous work, mostly cataloging artifacts and cleaning delicate paintings, but it was my first real step into the professional world. I was thrilled. My parents, as expected, barely reacted. "That's nice, dear," my mother had said. Distracted. "Did you hear about Jake's research paper? It's going to be published in a major medical journal." I held back a sigh. "That's great. Mom, listen. I was thinking of coming home for the weekend soon. Maybe we could." "Oh, I'm not sure that's a good idea," she interrupted. "Your father and I will be busy helping the boys with their research papers. You understand, right?" I did. I understood perfectly. After that call, I sat in my tiny dorm room, surrounded by stacks of art books and half-finished projects. The familiar weight of loneliness pressed against my chest. But this time, something inside me resisted. "Forget them," I told myself. "I don't need their approval." But deep down, I knew that wasn't entirely true. Some part of me still craved their recognition, still held on to the hope that one day, they'd see me for who I truly was. That day never came. Graduation arrived, and while most of my classmates celebrated with proud parents and lavish dinners, My big day was marked by a quick meal at a chain restaurant. My father barely looked up from his menu when he asked, "So, Emma, what's next?" I straightened up, trying to sound confident. "I actually got a job offer from a museum in Los Angeles." Dad frowned. "Los Angeles is expensive. How much does the job pay?" I hesitated, mumbling the not-so-great starting salary. The disappointment on their faces was instant. "You'll never be able to afford living there," my mother said bluntly. "Are you sure this is the right decision?" I was sure, but their doubt lingered, clinging to me like a shadow. As we left the restaurant, Grandma Margaret pulled me aside, her warm hands wrapping around mine. "Don't let them dim your light, my dear," she whispered, slipping another small envelope into my hand. Inside was a check enough to cover my first month's rent, enough to give me the push I needed. I hugged her tightly, trying not to cry. For the first time, I felt like someone believed in me, and that was enough. Moving to Los Angeles felt like stepping into a whole new world. The air smelled different, salt from the ocean mixed with city grit, and everything moved at a pace I wasn't used to. But despite the unfamiliarity, I had never felt more alive. The museum job was tough. My starting salary barely covered my rent. And some days, I worked late into the night cleaning ancient canvases, my fingers numb from handling delicate materials. But I loved it. Every brushstroke I restored, every layer of history I uncovered, made me feel like I was doing something meaningful. It was during this time that I met Adam. He was a graphic designer, still struggling to make a name for himself. But he had this unwavering passion for his work that reminded me of my own. We met at a small coffee shop downtown. He was sketching logo ideas on a napkin, and I was trying to balance my museum notes with a cappuccino that was too hot to drink. He noticed me staring at one of his designs, and instead of being annoyed, he grinned and slid the napkin across the table. "What do you think?" he asked. It was simple, a rough concept of a vintage-style bookstore logo, but something about it felt warm, inviting. I told him so. And just like that, we fell into conversation. Adam understood me in a way I wasn't used to. He knew what it felt like to struggle for recognition, to chase a dream when everyone else told you to be realistic. We spent hours talking about art, design, and the risks we had both taken to follow our passions. Before I knew it, we were inseparable. I didn't tell my parents about him right away. I knew what their reaction would be, and I wasn't ready for the inevitable disappointment in their voices. But after a year of dating, I decided it was time for them to meet him. I should have known better. From the moment we sat down for dinner at my parents' house, the interrogation began. "So, Adam," my dad started, trying to sound casual but failing, "what are your long-term career prospects?" Adam shifted slightly in his seat but kept his voice steady. "I'm building my client base. It takes time, but I'm making progress." Mom jumped in next. "And your income? Is it enough to support a family?" I felt my face flush. "Mom, that's not." But Adam squeezed my hand under the table. "It's okay, Emma," he said calmly. He turned back to my parents. "I may not be where I want to be financially yet, but I'm working hard to get there." The rest of the evening was filled with thinly veiled criticism, subtle jabs at Adam's career choice, and not-so-subtle comparisons to Jake and Ryan, who were both doing so well in their respective fields. As we were leaving, my mother pulled me aside. "Emma, honey," she said softly, her voice laced with condescension, "I know you think you care about this boy, but you need to be realistic. You've already chosen a difficult career. Don't make things harder for yourself by being with someone who has no future." I was too stunned to respond. My father, never one to let a moment pass without his input, added, "Your mother's right. You could do so much better." As Adam and I walked to the car, my head was spinning. The anger simmered beneath my skin. But more than that, I felt exhausted. "How dare they?" I muttered under my breath. "How dare they judge you like that?" Adam was quiet for a moment before he sighed and smiled at me. "It doesn't matter, Emma," he said softly. "What matters is what you think." And that was when I realized I didn't care what my parents thought anymore. For years, I had been chasing their approval, craving a recognition that would never come. But in Adam's eyes, I saw something far more important: acceptance, love, and the unwavering belief that I was enough just as I was. I had spent my whole life trying to be seen by my parents. It was time to stop looking for their validation and start living for myself. Cutting my family out of my life wasn't easy. For years, I had hoped they would change, that one day they would see me, truly see me, and be proud of the person I had become. But I finally understood that some people are incapable of giving the love and respect you deserve, no matter how much you crave it. Adam and I built a life together, one made of love, respect, and mutual support. Over time, his small design firm flourished, and my career in art restoration grew beyond anything I had imagined. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were thriving. Then, the inevitable happened. My parents, the same ones who had dismissed me for years, suddenly wanted to reconnect. My phone started buzzing with messages from relatives I had long since blocked. My mother's voice, suddenly sweet and affectionate, filled my voicemail. "We heard about Adam's success," she said. "We always knew you two would make it. We're so proud of you." But I knew better now. When they showed up at my door unannounced, I didn't let them in. When they sent expensive gifts, I returned them unopened. I wasn't angry anymore, I just didn't care. Instead, I focused on the people who had truly been there for me. Grandma Margaret, who had believed in me from the start. Adam, who had loved me despite my family's cruelty. And the friends who had become the family I had always longed for. As I stood in our new home, watching the sunset cast golden light across the walls, I finally felt at peace. This was my real family, and I had built it myself. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more real-life experiences that inspire, challenge, and move us.